Welcome to Dear Younger Me, a 10-part interview video series where we feature some of our very own VetTech alumni students who are currently working in various professional fields. We hope that these videos will give you a glimpse of the possibilities after you graduate for you to set bigger and bolder goals. Enjoy.
Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Dear Younger Me. My name is Nigel and today I'll be joined by Keiko. And today our guest speaker is going to be Xavier. Hi Xavier.
Hi,
Hello.
nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet
Nice to
you.
meet you too. So Xavier is actually a graduate from TP Biotech. Currently he's sequencing viruses during outbreak situations such as Zika and influenza. Right now he's performing next generation sequencing for COVID-19, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Would you mind introducing more about yourself, like your history, anything about your background?
Oh, sure, with pleasure. So, hi guys, I'm Xavier. So I graduated from Diploma in Biotechnology in 2014, and I did my internship in the Temasek animal facility where you guys train for 6 months under Dr. Choi Komfai and Eldon To, as was one of my mentors during that period. So after that, I went to NS like everybody else, and then I did my undergraduate in University of Aston, and I got a BSc honors in medical bioscience, and now I'm in NUS at Sauce Weehawk School of Public Health as a research assistant, trying to pursue my PhD in infectious diseases. So yeah, like you mentioned, right now the projects that I'm working on is coronavirus related. So a lot of carryover from the poly days, almost everything that they tell you, the fundamentals kind of really apply now more than ever. So we are trying to deep sequence the viruses from patients, trying to see if we can map a phylogenetic tree or even try to fingerprint the virus origin and how it kind of mutates over time using the patients. So quite cool stuff. Hopefully there'll be a few papers soon that you guys can read about. Yeah.
Wow, okay, that sounds quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. In your background, it says that you went into police first. So is there any reason why you didn't, jump into the field that you wanted?
Well, I mean, it's national service. Police was 2 years, and then afterwards, I knew I definitely wanted to go back to the lab. But it took a while for me to get a university that I like. I mean, courses are always there, but sometimes you don't want to step too far away from your discipline. So there were lots of like biomedical offerings or a lot of pharmaceutical offerings. But as a biotech graduate, I wanted to stay in molecular biology. So I tried to find a course with good modules that support that. So it took a while. So I extended my stay with the police for about 6 months as a regular to kind of save up and to also kind of collect myself and to really decide that I wanted to do this than before I enrolled. But eventually I did pull the trigger.
How did your education in TP help you to gain an edge in your job?
Wow, okay, that's a good question. So I think TP in general, the whole syllabus is structured in a way that it allows you to jump straight into a career. And there's a lot of things that they don't really teach you in certain undergraduate levels, but then they do kind of really emphasize in poly. So the modules themselves in biotech, at least, they really focus on a lot of broad disciplines like animal sciences, plant sciences, and all of that kind of stuff. So it really gave me a deep understanding of all the fields of biology, so I can actually choose which ones I want to go into later on. And even when you are, like right now I'm in virology, but then every now and then you would see crosstalk between, even bacteriology or even animal sciences. So you must apply the knowledges that you've learned from your diploma days to kind of tackle those challenges that come along. So the broad syllabus definitely helps 100%. And because of the hands-on nature of the courses, we had practical since, you guys would know, we had practical since year ones, and it's constant ruling. And that definitely goes far, especially now more than ever. Because when you're in a career, it's just like being pushed into a deep end of a pool. You can't make mistakes that you can afford to make practical lessons. So for sure, compared to A-levels kind of education, doing a diploma definitely helped to be more independent now more than ever.
I see.
That's good to hear.
So just out of curiosity, since you're from biotech instead of vet, how do you think VetTech students can actually enter research?
I think there's actually a lot of demand for VetTech students because there's a lot of fields in biology that actually demand animal work. In neurobiology, for example, I don't think you'll find any lab that does neurobiology that doesn't like handle mice at the very least.
Yeah, true.
So having some kind of background in training with mice and any kind of rodents will definitely give any kind of investigator more confidence to get you guys in the research lab. So that's definitely a thing that if you realize early, you can use it to your advantage, and you have to put it in the front of your resume because that's something that makes you stand out. And that's something that I realized whenever I went for interviews with neurobiologists, for example. I went for one I remember very specifically, and he mentioned the main reason why he was interested in me. It was because I had handled a lot of rodents, hundreds of them. So it's definitely something that they believe if they put me into a lab setting, you're not going to be squeamish about touching rats or getting bitten by mice because you've been there, done that. So you have to identify your strengths. And you also, if you want to go into research, there's a lot of going out of animal work. So there'll be a lot of molecular biology or just plain biology. So you have to brush up on that, and you need to kind of highlight that aspect of your modules that you've learned to show that you can perform in a normal biology setting, even though you have specialization in vet study.
You did your major project with lab animals, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Why do you choose to pursue like your career and instead of like working in the animal industry, for example?
I think I haven't completely moved away from it yet. I think I'm still in the waiting list. I'm still in line to start working with animals again. And that was something that my PI, when he did hire me, did mention that at some point of time, like now, for example, if let's say there's any situation where we're moving into a vaccine trial with primates, for example, so they would definitely want to have somebody who has some kind of animal handling experience. And I mean, that's just a really super cool example. But in another situation, if let's say we want to test, and this did come up at some point of time, if let's say we want to test mice models with viruses, then I would definitely be on the front line to receive the training and to go forward with that project. So I definitely want to work with animals again. Although at this point of time, because our lab is a new startup, I don't really have the opportunity, but it's so fun and it's really, you get to learn so much working with animals. So definitely I would go back into it again, and preferably at some point of time, you know, maybe even working with primates is the dream. But it's not easy. Yeah, but definitely with the experience that I have now, I'm sure I can inch my way there. So yeah, hopefully soon.
Hopefully you get to work with all those cool primates and stuff like that.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Describe.
Okay, so I'll continue. I'm sure that you like your job a lot, but also sure that there will be challenges that you face. So could you share with us some of the challenges?
Oh boy, the challenges come every day. But I mean, that's what makes it fun. Like overall, I would say experiments themselves, they don't cooperate with you when you need them to cooperate the most. When there's no deadline and it doesn't work out, it's not as crushing. You just kind of take a break back home, you know, sleep it off and then try again the next day. But then when there's a deadline and when people are waiting for you and some collaborators are waiting to make a move and grants are on the line, then it becomes really tough. Take failure in strides. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I always face. Yeah, when someone is knocking at your door, waiting for data. But you just need to kind of keep a positive mentality. And I think I always like to focus on the feelings that come afterwards. At times it just doesn't work, and then you just rack your brain over and over again. And then one day when you're just like in a cab on the way somewhere, and then it will just occur to you, and then you will try it out, and then it's just I cannot describe how amazing the feeling of like the success solving the problem is. So I always think about that feeling that I'm going to get eventually when I do solve this problem. So it's just like a pullback before the launch, and that's what keeps me going. But it is something that everybody needs to bear in mind so that they don't, you know, beat themselves up over it too much.
Yeah, it's always like kind of like you don't really know what to do. Then suddenly eureka moment in the most random situations.
Pretty much. But I will come to you eventually. That's something that you.
Yeah. So like for students, they will really have to take note of the pressure for deadlines and all these things when it comes to working in research.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And it also depends on what kind of lab that they're going to. I've seen a lot of labs, and a lot of the cultures are very different, and the research assistants that are from the different labs have very different responsibilities. Some of them don't really have a lot of weight on them. Some of them have a lot of pressure So it really depends on what you're comfortable with. So if you want to be somebody who learns more but doesn't really have too much roles and responsibilities, then you should source out a lab with a lot of members, with a lot of mentoring, for example. But then if, let's say, you want to be put in the front line and you want to have a lot of pressure on you and you want to learn that way, then you can definitely go for investigator that's new, that's very ambitious. Some investigators have a lot of ideas, but at the same time, all of the execution will fall on you. And if that's something that excites you, then I'm sure the pressure will be nothing in comparison to,
All this sounds very interesting, but I have a feeling that a lot of people don't exactly know what your job entails on a daily basis. So can you explain what exactly you do every day in your job, or like on a regular day?
That is a very difficult question to answer, because my day changes very drastically based on the experiment. So some days my day may start at 8 a.m. because I have like some kind of infection to do, and then some days it may start at 4 because that's the time when we can start the assay optimally, because sometimes we have to take time trials in like 12 hours and 16 hours, and then the optimal time to start will be 4 p.m. So it really changes, but for the most part, what I'm responsible for is maintaining of cell lines, essentially. So that we have a cell culture lab, and we have to make sure that we have enough mammalian cells. So in some situation where we want to infect any of them with viruses or do an experiment, there's enough cells ready to go. And right now, because of the pandemic, I'm shuffling back and forth from Tan Tock Seng, where our collaborators are, where we're sequencing the coronaviruses. So I have to oversee a bunch of our junior research assistants and make sure that everything's running smoothly and all the sequencing is going fine. And I also have students. So the whole thing revolves around all three elements of my research, my students, and the sequencing that's happening in Tan Tock Seng. So
Okay.
it is a hustle, I would say, but it's very different day to day. Like, for example, today my day starts at 11, my day is going to start at 2, and sometimes it ends at 12 a.m. It's really difficult to predict.
Yeah.
But it's fun, If it was 9 to 5, I don't really think I'd be as invested as I am now.
Variety is a spice of life, as they will say.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're talking about students and stuff. Are you taking any TP interns, for example?
At this point of time, not yet, but we are open to getting more interns from. We have a few from Singapore Poly, but then they are in other labs. And I have actually spoken to my PI about taking students from Poly, because it can be a good experience, and I can personally vouch for their capability. But not yet, maybe in the future, for sure. Because our lab is now growing, and if we have more people to take on students, then definitely. Really good.
So all those watching at home can take note in the future.
Yeah, sure, okay. Hit me up.
Some good news. Right now, you're pursuing a goal on getting a PhD, right? So, how would working in a lab help you to achieve this goal?
I think ultimately a PhD kind of trains you to do research for the rest of your life, whether it's in a form of being an investigator or whether it's still as another researcher. But it still kind of instills in you a lot of the research element and thinking scientifically. So for sure, if you get a PhD and you come out with a PhD, you can do a lot more. You can even somehow try to branch off to become an investigator, and you can design your own experiments. So that's like, the coolest thing. But for now, in the position that I'm in, it really allows me to have the critical thinking that I need, and also gain the experience, because every day we move into different techniques, and we move into different disciplines, and then there are completely different skill sets that you need to acquire. If I had started my PhD immediately fresh out of undergrad, I think the struggle would be part of my PhD. The struggle is always there. In fact, I even struggled when I first started. But having a struggle as an employee is definitely more comfortable than struggling as a student, because you have 4 years, 6 maximum, and all the time that you take screwing up and then restarting again is time that comes out of your own, time in your university. So doing it as a researcher is a lot more comfortable, I would say, and there's a lot more guidance from your PI, because he definitely realizes that there's equal amounts of stake, because if you screw up, then overall research for him, he doesn't get any data. But as a graduate student, a lot of the research, it actually belongs to you. So there's a lot more pressure there. So definitely learning the skills now, I can very quickly translate it over when I'm doing my PhD. And I'm sure it'll be much more smoother than going straight.
Can you explain like kind of what's the process of getting a PhD, for example? Or like what entails in getting a PhD?
Right. So basically what we will have to do after we get our bachelor's with honors. So the only way to go into a PhD is to either have an honors, but if you don't have an honors with your bachelor's, you can get a master's and then go into your PhD. Master's usually a year or two, and the honors year is just a year extension. So it makes much more sense for students who would want to do graduate studies to get a Bachelor of Honors. So that's something that you might want to consider if you're thinking of further studying. So after you acquire your honors, you can apply to do a PhD at a PI's lab, but you're definitely going to need to look at the kind of research that the PI does, and then you're going to have to draft like a proposal, sort of what you are going to do in your 4 years, and what's the main aim that you're looking to investigate. And after you write the proposal, you will send it in to the PI and the university. They will vet your qualifications, and then they will have a bunch of interviews, and then they will decide whether you're good enough for the lab, and then they will take you in. But the interesting thing about PhD is the struggle doesn't end when you get accepted. In fact, it just begins. So then there's a whole bunch of qualifying exams. Every few years, they will do a qualifying exam a couple of times, and then you will finally have to defend your thesis after 4 years with all of your research to a panel to say that this is what I've done, this is the data that I've collected, and then this is my conclusion. And then they will deem whether you're worthy enough to be given a doctorate. And then
well, that sounds like a lot.
It
But
is.
what motivates you to, strive to get that PhD, or like amidst all these challenges?
I think if you do speak to a lot of postdocs, and they always speak about their projects, it's always with a lot of there's a lot of love there, but there's a lot of struggling as well. And it's really like a badge of honor of climbing up that hill. It's pretty much like climbing Mount Everest. You put a flag all the way up there because you're proud of getting there. And being a doctorate in like a PhD itself is similar in a way. And a 4-year commitment to a specific research goal is definitely not easy. And in fact, I don't really think we've committed 4 years to something that's a single topic before. And once you finish it, you become like a real master at that topic. And I don't think anybody else can take that away from you. And you can carry the experience that you've learned, not just in that particular topic, but all of the experiences that kind of congregate in lab work. You can just carry it on for the rest of your career. And that's invaluable.
We've talked a lot about PhD and all this. So let's just move back to furthering the career. Why do you decide to do research in the first place?
Okay, I've always wanted to do science. I've always wanted to be a scientist. The longest time. The type of scientist has varied over my lifetime. Jumped from dinosaurs to like astronomy, and eventually I landed in molecular biology. But you would often, when you go into biotechnology itself, they kind of groom you to be researchers. And not a lot of people like to be researchers. And I saw my friends gradually dropping out, doing other things that they found much more joy in doing. But for some reason, I never felt like I wanted to leave. Like this was something that always excited me, even with all of the adversity, even with all the failure, even with, the difficulties that research poses, the irregularity and the, I always found it super exciting. And then the thrill of discovery and, going into being your own kind of, like you get to make choices and you get to discover things that nobody else get to see. You as a scientist, you will get to see the discoveries as they emerge first. And that's it's really an unbelievable thing. So that's one of the reasons why I'm still here. And I think that's one of the reasons why it will still keep me here for many years to come, because I am seeing things every day. When you look at a coronavirus sequence and then you realize that, wow, nobody else has seen the sequence before. You're the first. And then you get to upload it online and now the whole world can see it and everybody else can pick off of it and do more work. That's really, everybody has a calling and that's mine. Yeah.
It's pretty cool that you're like one of the first few people get to see all this stuff.
Thank you. It is super exciting. Yeah.
If you want to stay in your line of work, like what do you get promoted to?
Okay, that's a good question. And I think that's one of the cool things about the research industry itself. They don't exactly discriminate based on your rank because they require people at every level. And
Ah,
you will
yes.
see research assistants that are really elderly, like in 50s or 60s. And they're fine being there because they just want to support a research team, but then they don't directly want to do any kind of research because they enjoy the lab setting, they enjoy all of the things that keep the lab running, but then they just don't want to do they don't like the irregularity. So you can just remain as a research assistant and even a lab technician, and you can support the lab that way, or you can do a PhD and become a postdoc. And then from there, there's also many kind of routes to take. Some of them go on to establish their own lab, establish their own research, but then some of them just continue working for another PI indefinitely because they don't really want to be in the forefront of politics, because being a investigator has a lot of political involvement in terms of what the university wants and all that. So some people don't like that, and then they just remain as a postdoc. But they do drive researchers forward, and they have like a small team of research assistants working for them. So you are kind of like in a leadership role, but not in the tippy top. And there's a lot of people that kind of break out of research completely and they just go into industry. And I think that's also kind of cool. And it's definitely something that I would consider when I'm much, much older, because there's a lot of money to be made in industry. And at the same time, you support the world of research in a completely different way. So right now, for an example, we're sequencing coronaviruses, but we're not using the classical next generation sequencing platforms. So everybody loves to use Illumina, but our company is not, our lab is not exactly looking to use Illumina. We're using a smaller company called Nanopore Technologies, which is a completely new way of sequencing coronaviruses. The sequencer itself is the size of a stapler, which is quite amazing if you think about it. And if you are in an industrial position where you are with this company that's developing sequencers that are size of a stapler, you are also pushing research forward, not in a kind of a contributory role like the other researchers, but in an industrial role, that these technologies will definitely become the next thing in the future. And in fact, I think there's one in the space station also because of its size. So a lot of cool things that you can do if you don't want to do the grind of research. You can still kind of contribute to the world of research in some way.
Would you say it's easy to switch positions? So let's say I start on this certain position, but I feel like, it's not what I want to do. Would you say it's easy to switch around?
I would say it's very dependent on what demands the new role has of you. So if let's say you, like for example, if I have sequenced a lot of coronavirus samples, and if I want to jump over to a company that's selling the sequencer, I think I would find it much more easier to do it because I have a lot of experience in the field. But then if let's say I'm jumping into something completely irrelevant that I haven't really tried, then I think the learning curve will be much more steep. But it definitely is doable. I subscribe to this belief that biology is biology. And it's just different flavors, but it's the same dish. No matter where you go, at some point of time, you will pick it up. And it depends on whether someone is willing to give you a shot.
It's pretty clear that you're passionate with your work and you enjoy what you're doing here. So do you have any like memorable experiences in your past, or any like projects you've done or are doing that you feel like has a special place in your memory?
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. But I would say most of my time in TP was actually the most memorable that I've ever had. And I think a lot of it comes to accountability and responsibility, because when you're younger, you can afford to make extremely ridiculous mistakes. And in the end of the day, everybody will just wash it off because you're a student. But when you are much more older and you are in like a position that I am, and I have students under me, I have about 4 students under me, there's a lot of accountability, because if they screw up, you screw up. You can't afford to play around like you used to back in the day. So there were many times when we would be doing, I remember when we used to sit in the animal facility, and then we used to record rats all day long, like literally put a camera in front of their faces and just record their facial expressions to kind of assess pain. And I think if I tell anybody else that we have like GBs and GBs worth of videos of rats just doing their thing in a small confined space, then they would not really understand what is happening there. But it was more towards the fun that we had back then, and then we were a team, and it was fun. And those were the times that I really relished.
What are some important traits to be a good lab researcher?
Okay. I would say the most important trait, and this is something that I always tell my students and any new researcher that joins our lab is that failure will always come. And I think that's something that a lot of people have trouble with, because when failure keeps impacting you again and again, it becomes very difficult to like keep going. And at the same time, there are a lot of people that kind of let it go a bit too easily, and then they don't learn from it, and then they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. So I think one of the biggest things with being a good researcher is finding the good balance of critiquing yourself without beating yourself up, and at the same time to let things go without being too nonchalant about it. So you still have to kind of, hang on to both sides. And I think one of the most important things a lot of people forget is you need to have fun. You must go into a lab every day, and you must see the fun nature in science, and also have a lighthearted, approach to everything. And that's the only way to keep sane. Otherwise, you'll go crazy.
Yeah. Such as many things in life and generally, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've come to the final question, where we ask all our interviewees, what advice would you give to your younger self in Temasek Poly?
Oh boy. You need to write an essay on this, but to sum it up short, I think the most important thing that I would tell myself is to look at the bigger picture. Because I think when I was younger, failure will always happen, and then many times, you get roadblocks along the way. But it's very important to realize that even if you do fumble, and if you do mess up, and then you make a fool out of yourself, it's going to teach you a lesson, and these lessons will definitely come back to really help you in the future. And they do leave a mark. But at that point of time, I didn't realize that. I just used to feel like the whole thing is pointless and I could just avoid this. But definitely to see the bigger picture and to realize that the mistakes that you learn now are necessary to be a better person tomorrow. And actually, there's a story behind that. When I was an intern with Dr. Choi's lab, I broke a micropipette once by taking the pipette tips too close towards the end of the box, and it broke the end off. And I didn't do this once, I did this twice. So it was bad enough. And at that point of time, I was so pissed off at myself because I had to pay for it, and I also had to, now the lab also has to pay for it. I just felt like a complete klutz. But now, when I'm a researcher, it's something that I'm constantly hyper aware of whenever I look at any boxes that could fall over or anything that can make the pipette break. So I have never treated a pipette badly ever since I've been in the lab again. So I think, breaking those two pipettes was necessary for sure to gain that fidelity that I need now more than ever.
Yeah.
Lessons are important. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much for
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Of course. It was fun.
Yes.
Good time.
You definitely helped a lot of students.
Good luck on your journey for getting that PhD.
Thank you so much. Yeah, looking forward to the struggle. It's going to be fun.
We have come to the end of the interview. I hope everyone enjoys watching and have learned something from this interview. And we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this episode of Dear Younger Me. We hope you have learned more about the research assistant profession. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we will be posting more videos about other professions.